Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. You're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. Now, it's a case of planes, trains, but not necessarily automobiles this morning. It seems thousands are set to defy government advice and jet off to amber-listed destinations for a break. Also, a massive overhaul of the UK rail network is on the cards. We'll talk to the man engineering it all, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, in just a few minutes. Also this morning, the recipe for eating well post-lockdown. We'll talk to celebrity chef Raymond Blanc about the reopening of his restaurant and his new recipe book, which pays tribute to his late mother. That's at 9:30 for you. And no anarchy in the UK, just live music. We'll chat to the Sex Pistols' Glenn Matlock, who's part of a Sky Arts campaign to support small music venues. That's at 9:45. It's Thursday, the 20th of May. This is here for years to come. Sky News reports are inside the mental health units dealing with a massive surge in children with acute psychiatric problems.
She doesn't come out of her room, she doesn't eat much. She needs help. She needs professional help.
A platform for change. The government unveils a timetable to shake up the UK rail network with a promise of a fairer ticket system. Another extension to England's vaccine rollout with more surge testing and surge vaccinations to curb the Indian variant. Conflict in the Middle East. Hamas officials tell Sky News ceasefire talks are underway, but Israel's Prime Minister vows to press on with the military offensive.
And it's already been very wet so far this month, but we're yet to expect even more wet weather for today and for the rest of the week. I'll have the details for you later in the programme.
A very good morning to you. Sky News has been given unique access to a child and adolescent mental health trust, which sees firsthand the mental health crises children are facing because of the pandemic. 100 children a day are now attending A&E departments, many of them suffering injuries as a result of self-harm. Now, those treating them are in no doubt the pandemic is behind the increase. They blame isolation, anxiety and unprecedented levels of distress. Well, it's thought that nearly a quarter of 14-year-olds have self-harmed, but the number could actually be much higher. Even before the pandemic, rates of hospital admissions for self-harm for girls rose by 36%. That figure doesn't take into account those in A&E. Now the latest figures show that although the first lockdown depressed the numbers coming to A&E with psychiatric conditions, they're increasing month on month. Our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has spent the last 3 weeks with the staff and patients of the Pennine Care NHS Trust and adolescent mental health services, a warning that his report on their work does contain references to self-harm, images of self-harm and references to suicide.
It's a very long walk up to the children's ward, and you do get time to think of what we're going to see when we get there.
Nicole Renshaw is a mental health nurse, and her patients are children.
Most of the time the children have harmed themselves, and there are children on the ward most days.
While the nation's been fighting a virus that's killed so many, thousands of children have been suffering, and the problem has been slowly and silently building. This is the children's ward of the Royal Oldham Hospital. And this is 14-year-old Laura. She's here because she's deliberately harmed herself.
Often children will self-harm or harm themselves in other ways to deal with stressful situations. And in Laura's case, that has definitely been a factor.
Laura's mum says her daughter hasn't been herself for a while now.
She doesn't come out of her room, she doesn't eat much. She needs help. She needs professional help. Well, I go through depression as well, and it comes and goes whenever it feels like it. So I know what she's going through.
Her pain is so raw, and I can see the fear in her face. What do you want to happen now?
I just want her back to normal, how she used to be. Smiling, laughing, joking.
I have to understand to make sure that you're safe.
Life at home in lockdown has been tough.
I've not really gone out as much.
So is that normal for you to be sitting in your bedroom all day long?
Not usually. I'm usually outside with people, but then COVID happened and now I'm...
Since COVID, they've all just seemed to reclused into the bedrooms.
Yeah.
And now she's stopped eating.
Like, I'm either too busy to eat or I'm doing something and I'll just forget about it and wait for later. So I just don't bother.
And how long's that been going on for?
Quite a while.
Right, our next bit, Mum, are you listening? We need to get a safe or a lock on a drawer. All medication, sharps, ligatures need to be in that box, OK?
And then Nicole gently tries to give Laura something to live for.
Okay. You want to go to college?
Yeah.
You want to go to uni?
Yeah.
I want you to hold on to that, because it can be done.
Before the pandemic, A&E attendances by children with psychiatric conditions had tripled in the last 10 years. Now, month on month, those numbers are continuing to rise.
She said she was going to kill herself.
Looks like she's assaulting Mum quite frequently.
This is Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, or CAMS for short. A child who's been in A&E for mental health reasons has to be seen here within 7 days. And it's in these rooms that they try to heal the minds of children. We've spent 3 weeks here with unique access to staff and patients to understand the pressure the service is under.
Have you ever done anything like this before?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, it started in year 7.
Ah, right, OK, so it's not only for a few days, it's been since.
Yeah.
So it's been for a couple of years. Yeah.
This is Summer. She was in A&E a week ago after harming herself. Now mental health practitioner Michelle has to figure out what help she needs.
Yesterday in English, I was like happy. And then like as soon as I went in Spanish, I was just crying my eyes out. I literally got sent out.
Summer explains that her mood can swing from high to low.
So the last time Summer self-harmed was that yesterday, did you say? Mm-hmm. Are they on both your arms, Summer?
Just one.
Just one arm?
Should
OK.
I show you?
Pardon?
Should I show you?
Yeah, you can do, yeah. Right, OK. So they don't... What's that on your hand?
What, that?
Yeah.
It's scratching.
Scratching.
I have it there as well.
Right, OK. OK.
I wish I didn't do it, like, but these are going to be scars now, but I just regret it, that's it.
It's thought around a quarter of all children Summer's age have self-harmed. It could be much more than that. The CAMS team is now dealing with a surge in referrals, self-harm, suicide attempts, anxiety. It is a grim but growing list of troubles. Dr. Chantal Basson is the lead clinical psychologist here, and she's worried about the effect the pandemic has had on some children.
There is going to be a section of people in our society who are kind of surviving through this now and are in total survival mode. And as we come out of the pandemic, that we're more likely to see the mental health impact on those young people and families. I think we might be feeling the tremors, but I think the impact may well yet to be seen.
Summer is now being supported by the CAMS team here at Pennine Care. It could be a long, careful process, but thousands of youngsters are having to wait to get to this stage. And for children in crisis, there is often no time to spare. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Well, if you've been affected by any of the issues in Nick's report, you can contact a number of groups. One is the Samaritans. You can call them on 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org. Now, Britain's railways are being overhauled. So let's speak to the man behind the master plan, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, who's here in the studio this morning. Good to see you.
Morning.
So what's happening? 25 years since privatisation, now this massive change. So what exactly are we going to see?
We're going to have one single familiar organisation called Great British Railways, and it will run all the different aspects of the railway in order to bring the whole thing together. It's 3 years to the week, actually, since that disastrous timetable change in May 18, where the entire system melted down. And when people said, well, who's got control of this? The answer was no one. There was no guiding mind. There was no, as the media used to like to say, fat controller looking after the railway. And today's reforms, what I'm announcing, takes care of all of that with a familiar brand, Great British Railways, that I think people will, be pleased to see having somebody in control.
Yeah, but one of the key points of privatisation was to separate track and train. You're saying that completely failed, and bringing it all back together again?
There were many successes, not least that twice as many people are using the railways. That was a big success of privatisation. But it became very, very fragmented. So if you were to say, whose fault is it that this train has broken down? There are actually 400 people to allocate the blame within the organisation who literally, crazy, would have to work out the size of the bird that hit the overhead line that caused the problem, and it would be attributed either to Network Rail or to the rail companies. It's just too complicated. But I don't want to go back to the days of British Rail either. We had declining passenger numbers and railway stations closed and things. So this will be still with the involvement of the private sector, running the concessions, running the actual trains, but they get paid for running those trains on time, keeping them tidy and clean, and it will be a single organisation selling you the tickets and running the timetable. But
in terms of not going back to British Rail, I mean, again, one of the supposed impacts of privatisation was that operating companies would have their freedom for certain levels of innovation and what have you. Isn't there a possibility here that Great British Rail will turn into a British Rail sort of Leviathan?
Well, absolutely not what we plan to do with this. So you're right. We want to keep the sort of the private, initiatives, the capital, the innovation, all of that in there. But you've got to have somebody on a railway, which is 20,000 miles of track, organising a timetable, organising the ticketing, making sure that there's a single body. So when something goes wrong, you can say, who is in charge here? And there's an organisation, and it will be Great British Railways who are in charge. So this reform, which is I see is being widely welcomed by industry experts this morning, I think is overdue. I think, as a commuter myself, I just want a railway that works. I want the ticketing to be straightforward and simple. And we won't be going back to the days of British Rail and terrible sandwiches and all the rest of it. It will be a new organisation.
OK, so what is the direct benefit for passengers then? I mean, certainly you want trains to be on time, you want them to be clean, obviously. I mean, that goes without saying. In terms of the ticketing, I mean, it is a bit of a nightmare at the moment, and it's expensive.
Yeah. Is
that going to change?
Well, that's right. At the moment, you turn up at a station, there are 2 or 3 different ticket machines. You're supposed to know which one to get. If you buy the wrong ticket, you can't use it on this service. All of that gets simplified. And you end up with a railway where you buy the ticket. It can only be the right ticket because there's only you're buying
company.
Yes, Great British Railways, and whichever route you need to take, you'll be able to take. But actually, the other thing is crazy. You stand by these machines, they print out goodness knows how many tickets for a single journey. Why have we even got paper tickets? I mean, it should be contactless. And one of the great things I'll be introducing in June next month are flexible season tickets, because we know that things have changed. People are working from home a lot more. If you're travelling 2 or 3 days a week, you'll be able to use these flexible season tickets. That's only possible because we've started now on the route towards this Great British
Railways. I wonder if is this going to guarantee that it's going to be cheaper, though? At the moment, if I travel into London, I live about 100 miles away, so if I travel in on the train, use one particular network, one company, it's cheaper than if I get a ticket that covers all the companies.
Yeah.
Now, is that price then going to go up to match the multi-company thing, or will it stay at the lower level?
No, well, the great thing is, depending on how many days you're travelling in, you might well be able to use a flexible season ticket to do this. And you don't have to work out how many days you're going to be travelling this week in advance in order to take advantage of that. And also, because it will all be under Great British Railways, you can take whichever route you wish to take if there were different options. And usually to get from A to B, there often can be different routes to get there, because it's all part of the same thing. One organisation setting the fares, setting the timetable. It's a simplification which I think people will broadly welcome in this country.
OK. So about something which isn't simple, which is the current state of the COVID pandemic. Can you talk about the Indian variant? Because we've still got flights, direct flights coming in from India. There was 4 yesterday at Heathrow. Why is that happening?
You can't prevent British citizens from returning home. No country can ban its own citizens from returning home. Are these all
British citizens that are returning?
It can only be a British or Irish citizen, I should say, or somebody with permanent residence. There's no... It's illegal to come here as a holiday maker from a red list country. And you ask about why the flights are direct. Well, if you think about it, if you say that a country's on the red list, only British citizens primarily can return, but then you say there are no direct flights, then you're enforcing a situation where people end up spread amongst many other flights and making it harder to carry out the mandatory hotel quarantine, which is a necessity if you come back from a red country. So there's some logic, and indeed we're actually trialling whether it helps to have everybody in one place on the same flight, come in and then go straight to government-managed quarantine.
What is confusing, you can understand people being a little bit confused, that we've seen a 28% increase in India variant since Monday, yet the Prime Minister then saying that he's more optimistic than he was a week ago about sticking to the June 21st deadline.
I think it may just be actually the dates when these are reported are not the same dates that are covered, so it will have covered a period before, potentially. But we are seeing, and this is what the Prime Minister and Health Secretary both said yesterday, that fortunately the vaccines are working. So the absolute key is people getting vaccinated. And once they are getting covered against all these variants, including this Indian. There are 3 different Indian variants, actually. This is B16172 that was causing particular concern. But it does actually, you do actually get protected once you've had that vaccine.
Last night when we heard from the Health Secretary, he said, and it did cause a bit of a smile in the office, let me tell you, that he said the government advice on foreign travel has been crystal clear. Even you've got a smirk at that one.
Well, all I was going to say is I announced it, actually, Friday week ago at a press conference in Downing Street. And what I said is, actually, if it's an amber or red country, please don't travel for holidays. It's for exceptional circumstances, and red is only for essentially British citizens returning. So I can be completely consistent and say the same thing today. That is the case. We are saying to people, there's a heck of a lot of hassle involved in, for example, an amber country. You've got to take a pre-departure test. You then have to take 2 further tests when you come home. Yet another one on top of that if you wanted to have tests to release after 5 days. You've got to quarantine. People will come to your house to check your quarantine. I mean, it's expensive. It's not. We're not at the stage of saying to people, go to those places on holiday. In fact, please don't. Green lists are for holidays, and a little bit of patience. As the world catches up with our vaccine programme, we'll get more of those countries opened up as green countries.
Well, and yet people are still going, and travel agents and airlines and everybody else are still selling the holidays and the flights.
But look, we've moved away from a situation where everything is, it's banned, it's illegal. I know we've got very used to this the last year. Yeah. Everything's banned and illegal, and, we're moving away from that and asking people to apply a bit of common sense. People asking for guidance. The answer is, actually, for a red and an amber list, it's not for going on holiday. And you might say, well, why have an amber? I mean, I've heard this several times, and let me just explain that. Every country in the world is put into the amber category, and then when the Joint Biosecurity Centre look at it, they'll either say, actually, this country has a particularly good record. They're doing all the sequencing. They're on top of the problem. They've got high levels of vaccines. It's a green country. Or there are real problems here. It's a red country. So the default is amber, but amber is not please go and visit there. There's a lot of cost and hassle and quarantine required when you go to those countries, and it is being very strictly enforced.
Look, let's wrap back round to transport if we can. I say, obviously, you want even more people to go on the trains with this new Great British Rail, and I know there's campaigns to get people back on the buses and what have you at the moment. What about mask wearing when people are on public transport? Should it happen? Would you like to see it happen even if it's not mandated?
Well, right now you do have to wear a mask on public transport unless you have an exception. I've been very, very pleased and impressed. The vast majority of people have been doing it. It's been very good, high levels of uptake. That remains in place. Technically, it's in place till the 21st of June. As we know, we'll have a review. That's the 4th stage of the unlock, and we'll be able to say more about it at that time. But it is, in fact, the law at the moment to wear a mask, and that's something that I think people have just gotten used to doing. People take their keys, they take the wallet, they pick up the mask, and they leave the home. And we're seeing more people come back to transport, as I say, cautiously, but I hope in one direction. We are moving towards a fuller unlock.
OK. Minister, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you. Well, let's get some more on those changes to the UK's rail network. Let's talk to Milena Veselinovic, who's at King's Cross Station in North London. What do people think, Milena?
Well, I think most passengers would welcome a more joined-up and accountable service. There's no doubt that this plan is aimed to putting a stop to the blame game when things go wrong, when trains are overcrowded or they're late or they're dirty. There'll be a single body that's responsible for all of that. At the moment, Network Rail, the state-owned government body, is in charge of the tracks, while private companies are in charge of running the services. And under this new Great British Railways, they will be responsible for all of it. This body will also issue tickets. They'll also set timetables. It's not actually supposed to come into existence until 2023, but some of the reforms will be rolled out much sooner than that. In June, there'll be those flexible tickets that the minister was talking about, aimed at people who travel maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Obviously, as a consequence of the pandemic, many more of us will be working from home more frequently. This new body will also be setting out timetables and selling tickets. And the industry has broadly welcomed this. The passenger watchdog Transport Focus said that people will be welcoming this new service under the auspices of one body. But unions are less happy, and they say that this is just papering over the cracks in the system.
OK, Milena, thank you. Well, still to come for you this morning, just after 7:30, we'll talk to Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary Emily Thornbury about her concerns for a farming deal with Australia. At 7:45, we'll be joined by the man running 110 marathons in 110 days to raise money for a local hospice and Macmillan Cancer Care. And with Hamas officials telling Sky News intensive talks on a ceasefire are ongoing, I'll be joined in the studio by Israel's ambassador to the UK. That's at 8:30. Now, surge testing and vaccinations are being ramped up at 6 locations in England as part of continuing efforts to control the spread of the Indian variant of COVID-19. Jemima Walker reports now from Hounslow in West London.
Hounslow in London is one of the areas where cases of the Indian variant have been identified. Here, along with Bedford, Burnley, Kirklees, Leicester and North Tyneside, there'll be an amped-up programme of surge testing and surge vaccinations.
I'm more worried about the effect it's going to have on the restrictions, the more effect it's going to have on local businesses and things. I'm not sure they can go through anymore.
With the lockdowns, a lot of depression, a lot of things that are going on in the community, that's quite worrying for every single one of them.
The variant is thought to be more transmissible, but there's a growing patchwork of areas where it's appearing.
There are now 2,967 cases known of this variant in the UK. And we are determined to do all that we can to ensure this new variant doesn't put our recovery at risk.
Although the government has increasing confidence that all the vaccines are effective against the variant, scientists are echoing the Prime Minister's call for a dose of caution.
The virus has not gone away. I really hope that, we can maybe have a conversation in a few weeks' time as we're approaching the June 21st date, and that's on track. But I think if we want to achieve that, we all need to be responsible and not push things too far after this relaxation that we had on Monday.
Morning. Good morning. Are you here for your vaccination?
Yes, I am here.
We've heard time and time again that this is a race between the vaccine and the virus. The vaccine rollout takes another step forward today as people aged 34 and over in England and 25 and over in Northern Ireland are invited to book their jabs. But there's no doubt that the Indian variant means the race is becoming that bit tighter. Jemima Walker, Sky News.
Now, could there be an end in sight to the violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? There are reports this morning of talks, at least, of a ceasefire. Let's get the latest from our correspondent in Jerusalem, Alex Rossi. What do we know, Alex?
Stephen, there are indications that things are moving in the right direction. Obviously, the diplomacy, the mediation has been going on for some time. There have also, we should have a caveat here, there have been rumours circulating of fairly imminent ceasefires earlier this week, which didn't materialise. But this does feel slightly different. Certainly Hamas officials inside Gaza, senior officials, are saying that it could come in the next 24 to 48 hours. Israeli media have also been reporting from Israeli officials that a similar time frame. But there have also been sources suggesting that the Israelis would like another couple of days to continue attacking targets inside the Gaza Strip, which would obviously prolong things. Now, overnight, there have been exchanges of rocket fire and Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli Air Force have been concentrating their firepower, they say, on the underground system of tunnels, which they have called the Metro. This is the tunnels that Hamas fighters and other Palestinian militants used to get around underneath the Gaza Strip to launch rockets and mortars into Israel. So that is continuing. And again, the sirens ringing out in southern Israel, rockets still coming across. But it does appear to be less intense than it has been over the last few days, which suggests again that it might be heading in the right direction. But of course, the longer this goes on, the greater the chances for escalation, and of course the possibility that it could ignite something far worse, perhaps even a dangerous regional conflict. OK, Alex, for now, thank you. Let's have a look at some of the other headlines for you this morning. And people hoping to cross into Spain gathered in the town of Fidek in Morocco and threw rocks and set fire to a barricade after they were refused permission to cross the border. Moroccan security forces clashed with the crowd and were able to disperse them after some time. The clashes came after thousands of people, including children, crossed into the Spanish territory of Ceuta illegally. A report into how the BBC journalist Martin Bashir landed the infamous Princess Diana panorama interview is expected to be published today. Led by Lord Dyson, it will conclude whether Mr Bashir's actions were appropriate and if they influenced Diana's decision to give the interview in which the princess claimed there were 3 of us in this marriage. The process has come under scrutiny after Mr Bashir, we found out, mocked up fake bank statements which she allegedly used to gain access to Princess Diana. New research suggests younger people who've had coronavirus are amongst the 1 in 7 adults that go on to suffer long COVID. A US study found 14% of those under 65 had at least one new condition that required medical care within 3 to 6 months of contracting the virus. OK, this is Sky News Breakfast. Let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Good morning, Naz.
Good morning. It's looking pretty unsettled once again for today. It's not showers this time, it's wet and windy conditions spreading eastwards across many parts of the UK and Ireland for today and for tomorrow.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. So far this month, it has been very wet, and we continue with the wet weather for today and for the rest of the week. As well as that, it is going to be very windy as well. The Met Office do have a warning in force, actually, from this evening into the end of tomorrow for central and southern parts of England and Wales, where there could be gales or severe gales, particularly around southern and western coast. Currently, there are spells of rain across Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and southwest England that will all move northeastwards through today, with the heaviest and most persistent downpours across Northern Ireland, Northern England and Wales. The rain more patchy elsewhere and a bit brighter later around central, southern and eastern parts of England, but still some heavy showers likely. And as I mentioned, very strong winds, particularly around southern and western coasts.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, we're going to be talking to Labour's Shadow International Trade Secretary, Emily Thornbury.
Our scientists tested reusable masks for how well they filtered particles, how breathable they were, and how they fared after multiple washes. But as you rightly said, we found a wide range in effectiveness, all the way from being able to block 99% of potentially harmful bacteria, all the way to only a third of particles being blocked in the worst performing masks. I think what was worrying for us was that there were high filtration claims made on the packaging of these masks, and yet they didn't live up to test. So if people are looking for maximum effectiveness and protection because they are worried, actually what they're able to buy isn't really clear for them, and they aren't actually living up to the claims that they're making. We also saw poor packaging instructions across a range of these masks, which actually could again, inhibit the maximum effectiveness, all the way from how you should be using the mask so that you can be as safe as possible, and then also those washing instructions. If they are reusable, you want to be able to wash them. What happens after you've washed them a couple of times? What happens to that effectiveness? So really the key thing here is that are these products that are out on the market really living up to those claims so people can make their own decisions about how effective they want their masks to be? One of the most popular ones that we saw was the Adidas face covering. It's widely available from stores like ASOS, Next, Sports Direct, but that only blocked a third of potentially harmful bacterial particles. Whereas the best performing that we saw was the Air Pop Pocket. It's a semi-reusable mask, but it had up to 99% filtration effectiveness. So you can really see the wide disparity of masks that you can find on the market, and really means that people need to do a lot of research before they look to buy a mask.
Let's return to one of our top stories this morning. And surge testing and vaccinations are being ramped up at 6 locations in England as parts of continuing efforts to control the spread of the Indian variant of COVID-19. Earlier, the Transport Secretary told us that vaccine take-up was imperative to curb the transmission of new variants.
We are seeing, and this is what the Prime Minister and Health Secretary both said yesterday, that fortunately the vaccines are working. So the absolute key is people getting vaccinated. And once they are getting covered against all these variants, including this Indian. There are 3 different Indian variants, actually. This is B16172 that was causing particular concern. But it does actually, you do actually get protected once you've had that vaccine.
Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Kate McCann. What do you make of that, Kate?
I think what's really interesting here is the contradiction, if you like, between what Grant Shapps was saying when it comes to amber list countries. Because he said, you know, I've been very clear, you shouldn't be travelling to an amber or red list country for a holiday. That's the government's message. But at the same time, over the last couple of days, some ministers have said, yes, you can go if you've got a particular reason. And we know that there are lots and lots of people booking flights or holiday companies offering really cheap deals to some of these countries. So people are doing it. We know they're leaving the country. But at the same time, the government, Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, is saying, we're going to send someone round to your house. You could potentially be fined £10,000 if you're found not to be quarantining. And they could do 10,000 of these check-up visits a day. Now, that sounds like quite a strict system, doesn't it? But Grant Shapps was saying, well, we're moving into a stage where we want people to take personal responsibility. We want them to think really carefully about their choices. So those two messages don't necessarily seem to fit alongside each other. I think the reality is, though, things are looking more positive. He said, you know, like the Prime Minister did last night, June 21st looks like it could be OK. Still a bit more data needed, but generally it looks like the vaccination's working. And if that is the case, I think the government is going to be more relaxed about travel to some of these countries, as we see that the vaccine is going to protect against these variants. And he said, you know, it's protecting against all three of the Indian variants at the moment. So potentially good news as case rates stay low, but still a little bit of confusion, I think, about what the overall message is. OK, Kate, thank you.
Well, let's get some more for you now on the conflict in the Middle East. And Hamas officials have told Sky News intensive talks on a ceasefire are ongoing. Now, since the Israeli-Palestinian conflict began more than a week ago, 228 Palestinians and 12 Israelis have been killed. Now, on the Palestinian side, that includes 66 children. We know that a 5-year-old Jewish child also died. Let's talk to Caroline Orr. She's the country director at the Norwegian Refugee Council, offering trauma care to some of those children who've now lost their lives. What is the situation actually on the ground there?
The situation is still extremely dire. We hear even last night the shooting in both directions continued. So we have a significant number of our staff who've had to leave their homes, who've had to leave their apartments due to the risk of being destroyed or already having been seriously damaged. So we have very limited access to areas in the Gaza Strip. We know over 40,000 people have sought refuge in emergency shelters, which are basically schools that have been transformed into shelters. But it's extremely difficult to provide any kind of humanitarian assistance until there is a ceasefire.
But we know, don't we, that because you've been working in the region for quite some time as an organisation and dealing with the trauma that some children, particularly Palestinian children, have gone through over the years. And some of those children you've been working with have now been killed, haven't they, as a result of these strikes?
Yes, so far we have the information that 11 of the 66 children that have died in the fighting, as a result of the bombing, were beneficiaries of our trauma counselling program. Yes, and these are children who have already lived through, some already through the 2014 or 2009 the hostilities, some in the course of the last couple of years. A lot of them have suffered severe trauma, and we fear that after ceasefire, when things go back to a slightly more normal situation, the level of trauma will be significantly higher.
Yeah, look, I'm not wanting to play the blame game with you in any way, shape or form. It's not appropriate for your role and your position, but I wonder, when you look at what is happening within Gaza City particularly, and along the Gaza Strip, there is so much decimation of key buildings and key infrastructure. How can life there even continue when this ceasefire actually kicks in, if it kicks in?
It's a good question. What we are pushing for as an international community, humanitarian community, is that a ceasefire shouldn't be the end of it. But we need to go towards a situation where Gaza can actually become, that Gazans can resume a normal life, which they haven't been able since the siege on Gaza started in 2007. People can't leave. And part of the damage, part of the incredible damage and destruction is a result of the fact that people cannot leave. And so until that changes, until there is a lasting solution for the civilians, for the people living in the Gaza Strip, it's any solution will be piecemeal.
OK, look, Caroline, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Stephen.
Let's talk to the Shadow International Trade Secretary, Emily Thornbury, who says, good to see you this morning. Look, can I just ask you, just to start with, on the Israeli-Palestinian situation? I mean, obviously, there appears to be some move towards a ceasefire. Yeah. Hamas saying it's negotiating. Israel, at the moment, Benjamin Netanyahu saying he's just going to continue. I mean, what should we be doing as a country?
We absolutely have to get behind the calls for an international ceasefire. Both sides need to stand down. We do need to be mindful, though, that in a way this is not a kind of equal fight, and the extent of bombing in Gaza is, frankly, appalling, heartbreaking. But there is no excuse for Hamas to continue to send shells into Israel. You know, if we believe in a two-state solution, that part of Israel that they're shelling is the part of Israel which is accepted as being part of Israel in the end. This is not part of occupied territories per se. There is no excuse for it, but there's no excuse on either side. And in the end, those that suffer are the civilians. I don't want little Jewish children in Israel or little Palestinian children in Gaza to go to sleep at night afraid they might not be able to wake up. It's appalling what's going on. Disgraceful.
Look, can I ask you about the Brexit situation? Because I know, obviously, you've raised concerns about this Australia deal. Now, it's important, isn't it? We're striking our own deals is a key part of Brexit, a key part of why we wanted to get out. On the surface, a free trade deal sort of sounds great, doesn't it? But there are concerns about the impact it's going to have on farming here in the UK. What do you want to see?
So, first of all, I don't want it to be framed as Brexit. You know, you almost hear from ministers somehow that, you know, we left the European Union, therefore, what's the point of having done that if we don't strike up deals around the world? Can we just, wheel away from this? We are where we are. We're out of the European Union. We now do trade deals. But let's do them in a grown-up way. We're not doing them in order to prove we can do trade deals or stand in front of British flags and shake people's hands. We're supposed to be doing deals that are to the advantage of this country. And I have to say, I don't think there is likely to be a country around the world that is going into a deal saying, well, yeah, it may decimate our farming industry, but to be honest, we need to have a deal in order to prove some political point.
Well, we do need a deal with Australia, though. We do need a trade deal of some description with Australia.
Well, it would be a good thing to have, of course it would, and I think we can get one, and I want us to, but we have to do a deal which is in the interests of our country. What's the point in doing one that isn't in the interests of our country? Why would we want to undermine our farming industry? Why do we want to do that? Of course we don't want to. We have high standards in our country of animal welfare, food production standards, and we don't want that undermined by cheap imports of food that is not produced to the same standards. And frankly, I don't think that it isn't just farmers. I don't think any of the British public want that. And so a deal is there for the having, but we need to have our offensive asks, we need to be defensive, and we need to have a trade policy which says, what are the opportunities for our country? What is the way we want to go? Let's have a trade deal that actually bolsters that and supports it. Doesn't cut across it because we need to make some sort of political point.
Well, look, the idea of a trade policy, I think, will be welcomed by a lot of people.
Absolutely.
But what about any Labour policies and anything? You know, after what we saw at the set of elections, which were not good for the Labour Party on the whole, I mean, one of the key criticisms coming out before and after polling day, actually, was that you were not presenting really any solid policy. Is that going to change?
Well, I think it was a mixed picture. There were certainly some results that we really... I mean, I regret losing any of our councillors or elected representatives. In some places we did really well, and some places we didn't do well. Of course, we certainly would want to do better. We need to do better in the future, and we are developing policies. I can talk to you how long have you got? I'm quite happy to talk about Labour's trade policy. I mean, in the end, what we need to do, as I say, is you start off by saying we haven't had a trade policy in this country for 50-plus years because the European Union basically did it for us. So now that we're out of the European Union, we need to work out, you know, what are the priorities for our economy and how do we get a trade policy that underpins it?
You should have had all this out before the election, shouldn't you?
Well, do you know what? We've got an international trade secretary who hasn't got a trade policy at the moment, so excuse me. Her trade policy is just sign up to as many deals as possible and never mind what it is that you're signing up to. A trade deal in the end says we will make it easier for our market to be accessed by whatever industry it is. Now, obviously, that will always have an impact on your domestic industry. In turn, we need to be thinking, right, we want to have access for, I don't know, a particular part of our industries which we see a future in and we feel our economy is going to grow into, and we make sure that a deal gives access to that particular part of our economy. That's how you need to do it, but you do need to have an overview and you need to have a vision.
What would you like to see differently done then in terms of policy over where we are in COVID at the moment? For example, on the travel system that we have, which is causing a lot of confusion at the moment.
Yes, yes. I honestly don't think that since COVID started that this British government has had the right policy when it comes to international travel. I think that they have been reckless. You just hear these terrible stories of people coming in through Heathrow and spending 3 or 4 hours queuing with people from green countries, yellow, amber countries, red countries, all mixed up together. And then, the people from the red countries go off and spend time, in hotels, but they've already spent 4 hours cheek by jowl presumably in some great Petri dish, potentially bringing in Lord knows what into our country. I think, and the Labour Party thinks, that we need to pause this. We need to stop it. We certainly need to stop this idea of amber countries, and we need to be much stronger about it. Pause it and have a look again at our trial, but really be much stricter about it. And that kind of links into the point, which is, we're doing really well. Thank goodness for our National Health Service. Thank goodness for our scientists. We are all getting ourselves vaccinated in this country. But in the end, we're only as safe as our neighbours around the world are. And what we need to have at the G7 is we need to have Boris Johnson showing some real leadership, bringing countries together and getting an international plan on how we're going to make sure that the world is vaccinated. And today, me and my colleagues have written to the government and said, we have a 10-point plan on what it is that you should do. We give this to you as a plan. We have to make sure that we have more vaccines, and we think that is a way of doing that. And we're trying as a responsible opposition to help, but they do need to start listening.
Well, we shall see if they do listen. Emily Thornbury, good to see you this morning.
Nice to see you too.
Well, still to come on Sky News Breakfast. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by the man running 110 marathons in 110 days to raise money for charities impacted by the pandemic.
Our job is to tell the truth.
This is a forgotten front line. They are dying here.
Here it comes. Cut.
Boy, have we got some interesting ways of showing you what's going on.
Their message to us, get ready.
Nothing like apocalypse.
Instructing you to stay at home.
I can't believe we did that.
It's pretty special, isn't it?
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
More flares going off, a volley of rocks, cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. We have now left Italy and entered France. Nobody's asked to check our identity. Made by people who dare to challenge. Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
It's devastating, actually.
For the early risers.
We examine the story beyond the headline.
For the knowledge seekers.
Welcome to Divided States.
For the straight talkers, the curious, and the ones who want to be entertained.
Backstage, Sky News' entertainment podcast.
For wherever you are.
Welcome to Sophie Ridge on Sunday podcast.
For the ones who want to know more.
Welcome to the All Out Politics podcast.
For the listeners.
From Sky News Storycast.
Sky News Podcasts. Listen and subscribe for free.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Rain and strong winds will spread eastwards today, with the heaviest and most persistent downpours across Northern Ireland, Northern England and Wales. It'll be windy too, especially across southern and western coasts, with gales or severe gales later. Tree pollen is still mainly airborne at the moment, but there are small amounts of grass pollen now too. Levels of pollen will be generally low today because of the unsettled weather.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Now, Gary McKee is running... He's running his 109th marathon in as many days today to raise money for Macmillan and Hospice at Home, West Cumbria. He's running his 110th tomorrow, and then hopefully he'll have a rest. He joins us now. He's in Cleator. Good to see you this morning. I mean, you must be crackers, Gary. 109 today. You must be looking forward to tomorrow and getting it all done and dusted.
Yeah, looking forward to a laying, actually. But no, people think it's tougher than it actually is. To me, it's just running. The incredible part is the funds that are coming in and how much money we're raising.
Yeah, I know you are chalking up a lot of money, and Macmillan is particularly important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, my dad was diagnosed with cancer in 1997, and he was a cancer survivor. But I just remember when he passed away that I wanted to do something in memory of my father. And I thought back to the day that we were told he had cancer and how many people were being told that devastating news. I wanted to be able to raise funds and give them the support that they require.
Yeah. Look, in all of this, you are raising a lot of money. But, I mean, you are also getting into the record books, aren't you? Aren't you smashing the record for the number of consecutive marathons?
Yeah, the Guinness World Record is 59. I'll do 110. I think the problem with Guinness is the verification of it. They ask you questions like who measured your course out and who witnessed you running it and things like that. So it was never really about records. It was just about raising the awareness and as much money as possible.
I was going to say, because haven't you run 100 before in 100 days?
Yeah, previously in 2017, I ran 100 in 100 days to celebrate. It would have been my dad's 80th birthday, and it was 20 years since his diagnosis, so I decided to 80 and 20, 100, we'll run 100 marathons.
Of course, in all of this, I have to say, as a Cumbrian, I'm from Dalton. Down the bottom end. So as a Cumbrian, I think you're flying the flag for us lot. So you're doing us proud. Are you getting a lot of Cumbrian support?
I run on a cycle path every morning, and we see the same people, and they shout the old Cumbrian words at us like "keep hossing on," which means keep going, do your best to keep going. And we get that every morning. It does pick you up, the same people shouting, and it's great.
Tell me about the trainers, because I know you've worked your way through a lot of trainers, and you've had some really good people helping out, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I'm running in especially cushion trainers, Hocker. Probably the most cushions you can get, and they do cost you quite a bit of money. And when people found out how many pairs I was using, they started buying me running shoes and running tights and things. So it has saved me a small fortune in gear, which is incredible from the local community and further afield, and much appreciated by myself.
Yeah, well, look, good luck, Gary, for today. Even more luck for tomorrow, and have a pint on us when you... we'll send you a £5 up. Have a pint on us when you're done.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
See, Good, solid fellow, that. Now, let's have a look at the weather for you. Here's Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Incredibly wet and windy conditions across many parts of the UK and Ireland for today and for tomorrow. And in fact, for the rest of the week, we continue with this unsettled spell of weather. It is really looking quite wet. And so far this May, it has been very wet with above average rainfall. Now, currently, there are spells of rain across Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. Dry elsewhere with some sunshine still across some eastern areas where it's a chilly morning with a local grass frost. That rain moving its way north and eastwards through this afternoon with the heaviest downpours across Northern Ireland, Northern England and Wales. Winds also strengthening later with gales or severe gales likely around southern and western coastal areas.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.